Welcome to Early Intervention Matters, the podcast that helps parents, teachers, and health professionals understand the diagnosis, treatment, care, and support of children with autism, ADHD, Tourette's, and other neurodevelopmental challenges. Your host, Dr. Inyang Takon, is a consultant neurodevelopment pediatrician, and she will provide insight through interviews, answering questions, and breaking down complicated topics. By sharing stories from parents and professionals in the field, we hope to make sense of what can be an overwhelming topic. Early intervention is crucial with children with developmental difficulties. Yes, early intervention matters. And now, here's your host, Dr. Inyang Takon.
Hello, everyone. You're welcome to today's session of Early Intervention Matters podcast. I want to welcome everyone to the show. We've got another interesting episode today. But for those who are just joining us for the first time, Early Intervention Matters podcast has been going on for the past 5 years, and we're a platform that discusses different topics related to neurodiversity. And the primary aim is to bring topics which sometimes are not discussed in full, or there are reservations about discussing it, or people don't know where to find credible information. We break down those topics here. We've been very fortunate to have people with lived experience over the years, young people, families, professionals who are experts in their field. And I must tell you, I learn from these episodes every time. So we're really fortunate today to have Jessica Danel with us. I was lucky to come across Jessica on a podcasting platform, and I was really inspired by her story. So we will be talking a lot more with Jessica today. But before we go on, I just want Jessica to introduce herself. You're welcome, Jessica. Thank you for accepting to join us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I love your platform, first of all, because yes, I mean, maybe had I been able to have a place to go like this to get some more information. I mean, I didn't have a lot of support when it came to finding. It's like I learned on the go, and navigating through it was like, at first it was, I don't know how to say it. It was more like heartbreaking than anything. And, you have mommy guilt, and I became a helicopter parent because I was always trying to make sure my kids were okay. It was like every little thing, and now to their detriment, I realized that I was hovering over the top of them their whole life. But, it's one of those things that you just, deal with day by day when you have kids that are neurodiverse. To start it off, I became a stepmom first, and my stepdaughter has attention deficit, and we went to all of her IEP meetings, and later in life, we realized that she not only has attention deficit, but she's bipolar and has depression. So she's 32. Well, shoot, she'll be 33 like in a week. But so that's many years that I've been through that with that one child. And then I have a son, he's 25. And he was diagnosed with Asperger's at like 8, I think. And he just he just does not does not get along with other people, thinks everyone's out to get him. And he thinks very concretely. And it was difficult because I was getting calls from the school like every day for my son. Every day was something. Like the teachers were, one of the IEP meetings, they'd be really mad. It's like, your son never sits down and he's always walking around and all that. And I was like, well, what grade is he getting in the class? And she's like, a 98. And I'm like, and I always took his side, though. I always tried to make sure that he felt he had a champion in his mother, that I was always championing what he thought. If I thought he was wrong, I would not necessarily take his side per se, but I would not, in front of his teachers, make him feel small or for whatever reason, I wanted him to feel as though, he had an ally in his mom. And so a lot of moms out there, and I'm sure a lot are listening, dads are great. Don't get me wrong. My husband and I, we've been together 28 years, but it's the moms that deal with all of this stuff generally. Dad's usually working, and although I was working, usually the one being called from the school for every single child. And then comes along my daughter, Piper. And the funny thing with Piper was that the birth itself for my daughter was a comedy of errors and traumatic. I was pushing for so long that the nurse was using her little finger trying to like get her out. It was kind of gross, but she wouldn't go. And the doctor kept taking naps and coming back. And he goes, she can go another 20 minutes. Give her another 20 minutes. So finally he came in and I was like, really, I was out of steam. I couldn't go another second. And he comes in, he's like, another 20 minutes. And I got up on my elbows and I said, get this effing baby out of me now. Like, I couldn't do it. I could barely talk, let alone like push. And he takes off his gloves. He throws them at my hoo-ha and he says, fine, prep her for surgery. And so then I get wheeled down this hallway with my, privates out, and they didn't really cover me. And I'm walking down, and there's nurses and men and all, they're just watching me. And I get into the emergency room and this doctor's cutting into me. And I said, man, thank gosh. I said, that stupid doctor, he had me pushing all night long and I can't do it anymore. And the doctor said, yeah, that would be me. I couldn't see it. Had a thing over my face, like I was so embarrassed and my blood pressure went up. And then he pulls out my daughter and he says, yeah, she wouldn't have come out because her head was too big. She was like over 8 pounds. She was a big baby. And she had a big head. And so she didn't cry or anything, but she was very pale. And my mom goes, oh, she's beautiful. And then the nurse whisks her out of the room. And I was like, well, what's going on? Why didn't she cry? What's going on? And my mom goes, oh, they're just cleaning her, because she didn't want to tell me that something was not right. And so I get out of the recovery room and they come to tell me that Piper wasn't breathing. And so they had to put a breathing tube down her throat, and that she was pale, and that she came out with a huge hematoma, big, enormous red hematoma on top of her head, and quarter-size bruises behind her ears.
Wow.
And the doctor that in the NIC unit that was caring for her thought they dropped her on the floor, or that she was a vaginal delivery. And so he immediately sent her, after they got her stable, sent her up for a CAT scan. Yeah, because they thought that she had a tumor on her head. And so come back, she just basically has bruising. Poor daughter was just bruised to death. And so then, of course, she was in the NIC unit. Same with my son, by the way. I don't know what it's like to bring home a baby from the hospital that has not been in the NIC unit first. Like, my son had ended up having sleep apnea. And so he actually was on a heart monitor for 6 months. And so then come down to this, my daughter's in the NIC unit and we're about to leave and the doctor's doing his rounds, gonna release her. And he listens to the heart murmur and he goes, nurse, do you hear that heart murmur? And the nurse looks at him like, duh, like we've been caring for her. And he goes, well, I have to send her up for an echo. And so he sends her for an echocardiogram. And then he sits us both down the next day and he says, okay, you're going to want to Google this, he said, but don't. And I looked at my husband and I pulled out my phone and I dialed my mother's phone number and it rang. And as he's talking, he says, your daughter has tetralogy of Fallot. And my mom, who was on the other line, was waiting for me. And I go, Mom, look up tetralogy of Fallot. He just told me not to Google it and I'm Googling it, And she goes, Jessica. And so then I go, okay, Mom. And I knew just by what my mom said, I hung up and I listened and I knew that it was going to be not good because he basically was telling me like, it's not a big deal or whatever. No, my daughter needed open heart surgery. And so they let us go and we ended up seeing a doctor. And in my book that I just wrote, I talk about the whole experience, but we met people along the way and some crazy coincidental things happened during the time that my daughter had her surgery. We met another parent that actually had this. Now, this is not common, tetralogy of Fallot. It's not rare, but it's not common. I guess I don't know how to explain it, but it's out there. And basically she had like a hole in her heart and then she needed her aorta reconstructed. And so your first surgery usually is in the first 6 months of your life. They like to have you get a little body weight on you on the so that they sustain surgery and their heart maybe gets a little better. I mean, there's a newborn that's a lot more difficult than a 6-month-old to do heart surgery on, I'm sure. So her heart surgery went without fail. It was great, just like we thought. But open heart surgery is not easy. They had to pry her from our kung fu grip when they took her into the surgery room. It was terrible. But it wasn't until later that we found out that Piper had so many more problems than just her little heart. There was so many different things. I think what made me feel like this wasn't going to be the same rodeo that I went through with my other kids was when the doctor basically said she needs open heart surgery. Like I just knew nothing was going to be the same. When it came to this child, and it was
Yeah,
not
you
going
have
to
to.
be like my others.
Yeah. Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, what a journey. What a journey. And I'm sure there'll be people in the audience that have gone through this roller coaster experience with, coming to terms with what your child has or having some expectations and expectations being quite different afterwards. And, you just describing it with all the emotions and the fears and the scares and the reaching out and just the puzzling. I think it just captures a lot of what some families experience when they have a child and they begin to see some differences and they're not sure, but we're quite proactive in the way that you were reaching out for help. And even your experience during labor, it can be quite nerve wracking because you just feel you're helpless at that point, but you need somebody to guide you through, and that helps sometimes doesn't come through for people. Many parents describe kind of before and after before the diagnosis. So you've talked about your three young people with different aspects to their diagnosis and how you got to that point as well. What did that shift look like for you emotionally and practically?
Okay, I used to own one of the largest preschools in my town, and I taught preschool for many, many years. And I would see children of all different types. And I would see a child with Down syndrome, and I would say, I don't ever want to deal. I don't know how they're handling a child with Down syndrome. I don't know if I can ever do it. Or I'd see a child with heart condition. I'm like, oh, thank gosh. My son never had that problem, and I'm blessed in that way. I would never want that for me. And all these different things that I ever said, or autism, all these things that I thought when I would see children with struggles and their complexities, and I would say, thank God that's not me, or thank goodness I don't have to deal with that, or please God, don't ever let that happen to me. Has all happened to me. I've had every single thing. But I mean, I'm sure God did it because he knows that I can handle it, but I didn't think I could. I didn't think I could be a parent that could handle it, but I'm learning that I'm stronger than I ever thought I could be. And I've had every single one of those, the things that I've ever thought that I never wanted to have to deal with my children. I've had every single one of them. And so, I thought parenting was going to be one way. My sister's children are for 4.0 students and very active in sports and sports clubs and getting scholarships and all that. No, my son tested out of high school early because he couldn't handle high school. He's too smart, actually, but he couldn't handle it because socially he just didn't get along with anybody. And it was better that he did not go to school. I actually homeschooled him during different times of his life. And at the time that I pulled him out, he was a junior in the beginning of his junior year. I didn't do it. He did it. He asked me for it. And I said, okay, I obliged him. But my daughter we'll talk about her complexities, but she's not in an inclusive class. She's in a special education class, and she's a sophomore in high school. So, I thought that I was gonna have, like, my sister's kids, these little go-getters and scholarship, because I was all in sports, and me and my husband both were in college sports. Like, we did all of those things, we thought our children were gonna do those things too, and no, no, my kid, like, my son didn't walk across the high school, you know, with the diploma, and here comes my next one, and she's actually gonna get to walk across with the diploma, but it's not gonna be a diploma. It's gonna be a certificate of completion. So it's not the same. So what I thought was gonna be my parenting life and what it was gonna look like is totally not the same. They're totally different. So does that
Thank
answer
you for
it?
sharing that. Thank
Okay.
you for being so open about that. And I believe that this is the emotions a lot of families face. When you're pregnant, everybody is expecting you. You're excited about the baby you're going to have, and actually, it can be quite difficult to go through that emotional phase where you come to terms with, actually, I have to love my child. Yes, it's not what I thought was going to happen to me. You clearly expressed that quite well, that as a preschool business owner who was in charge of seeing lots of children, you were saying no, that you can't deal with that. But turned out that you had to be faced with actually having your children having these different conditions. And how did you move from that feeling of overwhelm to being empowered and feeling informed and navigating? Because it's quite a lot that you have to navigate when you're going through assessments. Because it can be totally crushing and you can just get too overwhelmed. How did you move from that to being able to cope?
So when your kids are in school in the United States, they have what's called an IEP. It's an individual education plan. And those are in school. I don't know if you guys have them where you're at.
We have something different in the United Kingdom,
It's
but
kind
it's
of
quite
similar but
similar to
different.
an IEP.
Yeah, what it is it basically gives the child the right to be disabled and not have it come back to, make them in trouble in school. Because my son getting up and walking around is not, in his IEP, we had to make it okay for him to get up and walk around so he would not be in trouble. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. IEPs, these individual education plans, you have to go into a room with all the experts that the school wants to bring. And it's almost a room with like you and like 10 to 15 other people. And it is very, I don't know if the word would be scary for the parent, or it could be overwhelming. And you have to go in there and fight for what you believe is right for your child. Just because they think that all these things are happening and this is what they feel would be best does not mean that that is best for your child. You know your child. And just for an example, for my son, this is before my daughter was born with all her complexities, or before we knew she had all the problems that she has, which I still should make sure I tell you about. But so they wanted to put my son in a special education class where he would not go to his normal classroom and get the normal education. He would get a dulled down education, and he'd be with other students with great disabilities. And I said no. I kept saying no. And they said, well, will you please just go look at the classroom? And I walked in there, and now I know my daughter is as special as she is. But at the time, during the lenses that I was wearing as that parent of my child, these kids, they were severely autistic, or they were hitting themselves on the face. They were crying, screaming, barely doing multiplication. And my son was into algebra. He was doing more advanced math. And I was like, I'm not going to let my son, who is a straight A student, by the way, who just has a social problem, you know what I mean? He has Asperger's. He cannot relate to people socially. He doesn't read social cues very well. He's in his own little concrete box. But I wasn't about to let them put him in a class like that, because he wouldn't get the education that the other students were getting. And I think he would regress. I don't think he would thrive. And so I put my foot down and I said, no. And the school kept pushing, and I said, we're not going to discuss this again. So please don't bring it up, because this is a no. And so I had to be the parent, like they're like, crap, we can't mess around with this Mrs. Danel. Mrs. Danel does not put up with anything. Like, I had to put my foot down. You have to be able to say what you feel is best for your child. One more instance, so we'll move on. But my son had to have a shadow then, okay? Which is like an assistant that follows him around. Yeah. And I was cool with that, because Parker sometimes needs to make sure he's on the right path and that he doesn't get in trouble. And so the aide that they gave him would say mean things to him and tease him about the girls and say, oh, I know you like her. You want to give her a kiss. Really inappropriate. My son would come home crying, and I'm like, I need another aide. We cannot have this aide, because she is not. And I had warned the school, like, this was not the first instance. So after a couple times, I said, you know what? We need an emergency IEP meeting, because we need to take that person off of Parker, and I need a new one. And they said no. They would not allow it. So I pulled my son out of that school and I homeschooled him, because I'm like, I'm not going to make my son be, felt bad by this lady that's like teasing him all the time. That's terrible. And she admitted to saying the stupid things. And she said she said she'd stop, but then she had never stopped. So as a parent, it's your responsibility. The education of your child is your responsibility. So you have to do what is right for your child. And if anything, if I leave you with anything, that is a very important thing to know. The other thing is now my son's 25, so that was all 18 years ago or whatever. Now IEPs can be done via Zoom. Most of them, I'm not sure where you're at too, maybe, but via Zoom. And I 100% say, if you can do it Zoom, do it, because you don't have that feeling of being bombarded with all those people. They're on a screen, so they're less intimidating, and you still get your word across. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying, which is
That's really helpful. That's really, yeah. So what would you say to families who are listening to this right now? There's a family out there listening to this and they're big worrying about their child's development and what to do. What would you say to them?
Well, okay. So I'm a storyteller. So let me just bring this into a story. So here's what I would do. I personally had a doctor that was not listening to me. I had a child development degree because I taught preschool. So I knew early childhood education. And my daughter at 2 was barely saying one word. And she should be talking, like saying at least a 4-sentence word or a 3-sentence word. And she wasn't. She had just barely started to walk. She would not eat solid food. Now, comes to find out, my daughter has what's called AFRID, and it's called avoidance
Restrictive food intake
Yes.
disorder. Yeah.
Yes, AFRID. And but nobody's actually diagnosed her with that. They said, yeah, that's what she has, but it's never been on paper anywhere. But I diagnosed her because she's still 16 and will not put anything in her mouth that has a texture to it. She's 16. She eats pudding. She'll have mashed potatoes. At least if mommy does them really well, she'll eat the mashed potatoes. But she'll eat tomato soup, ice cream, and then protein shakes. I'm not kidding. And she'll eat Gerber rice cereal. And she's 16-year-old. She's eating baby food. But I could never get her to stage 2. And so at the time, the doctor was telling us, she's fine. She'll meet those milestones. And my mom finally said no. She came with me arm in arm into the doctor's office. And she said, I'm going to demand that you give her an MRI so we can find out what's going on. If there's something going on, we need to know. And he said, fine, whatever. So he did. And yeah, it came back. She has cerebral palsy and she was microcephalic and hypotonic or whatever.
Yeah.
And so all of those things showed up on the MRI. And then so the doctor's like, oh, I'm going to send you to a neurologist. So they did. And the neurologist said, there's nothing we can do. Your daughter just has what she has. It's not going to be where she'll be in a wheelchair. It's not like MS. She's just going to have difficulties and you won't know what those are until she starts to get a little bit bigger. So here we find out that my daughter has cerebral palsy. And so what I would say to parents, if you have an idea that something is not right, and maybe the school might even also be saying some stuff to you, if the school's telling you your child has attention deficit disorder, don't take that as the word of gospel. Okay. Take it with a grain of salt and go get your child looked out by a doctor and a professional, because they are the only ones that actually can diagnose your child with anything. A school can only recommend that they think or they feel, or there's some indications. But like I said, take it with a grain of salt. Go look to a professional and get a diagnosis for sure. So with our diagnosis, we were able to get Piper finally, we're finding out that yeah, she's not reaching all these milestones and she's not talking. We took her to a speech therapist and they said, write down all her words and let's see what her vocabulary looks like. And I said, okay, she knew a lot of words. I believe it, like 72 or something I wrote down. I can't remember. She just couldn't say 2 words together. We got her speech therapy. We put her in a special preschool. And within the end of this preschool year, she was saying a 3 to 4 sentence word with help. Can you imagine? Had we not taken, pushed that doctor, we might not have gotten services, because we were able to get services from a place here in California called the Regional Center. And they were able to put us in the preschool, because you can only go to this special preschool if your child has certain disabilities. And it was the only one in town, but we were able to get in and with this diagnosis and get her early intervention in preschool, and so that she had a better start had we not even put her into preschool. Because, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I didn't need preschool because preschool is a luxury I can't afford. But my daughter needed preschool for her developmental ability. So
Fantastic. So the message is, if you feel there's something wrong, go make sure you get help. And also, it's not uncommon what you've raised, Jessica. Schools would say, well, I think your child is autistic, or I think your child's got ADHD. You have to get your child assessed so that they can get the right assessment and diagnosis, so that they can get the right support.
let me
And this
add,
is what,
before you go to the next question, let me just add this. So when my daughter was young and she got that diagnosis, we also tested her chromosomes. And back then, the chromosome check came back perfectly clear for nothing. And so, because I had asked the school and different people, I'm like, do you think my daughter has autism? Because she flaps her hands a lot. She's been doing it since she was a baby, but she flaps her hands and she acts a little different, She's super sweet. Don't get me wrong. Has a heart of gold. My daughter is just amazing. But she was doing that a lot, and they said, no, she looks you in the eye. She's fine. Don't worry about that. No, they're wrong. So 15 years later, 11, 12 years later, the doctor said to me, I think she has autism. And this other doctor and from Loma Linda, like a big medical hospital here in the United States, very well known. And the doctor said it was her heart doctor. And so she sent her to get her chromosomes checked. And sure enough, my daughter tested positive for what's called 16p.11.2. And they said it's a mosaic of it. It's not necessarily the full 16p. It's got a little pieces in here and there. And so she may not, experience all the things that are in that.
condition.
And so then she was diagnosed for autism level 1. And that was at 15. But had maybe we known this back in the day, she would have had a whole life full of maybe some different experiences and help. Along the way. So thank goodness we're living in a time where technology is getting better. And so these things can be detected earlier. But if you have a child that's like 16 years old and you know that there's not something right, take them and get their chromosomes checked, because there's a possibility there's something there. And that would help them in the future. If they can't get a job or they can't do, there's possibly disability and some other things that they might be able to qualify for. I'm just saying, that's just my story. So I'm telling you that from experience.
I think what you've drawn out is that as families, if you feel that there's something wrong, make sure you begin to look for, advocate for the child to get the assessment by professionals who are competent and trained in the field and can do that and support with the diagnosis. Thank you. So we move on to another section of your life, because obviously, like you mentioned, you used to own a business before, preschool business, and you built that while raising children and managing additional needs at home. I must say that's quite I must applaud you for being able to do that. But what were the realities? Because obviously you were driving in that, trying to get the business going, and it usually comes at a cost. Was there any cost to it that you had to go through to make that business successful while dealing with all these challenges? What is it people wouldn't see? People would see you had this successful business, but you also had these challenges you had to deal with supporting your children. Were there any things that people were not seeing on the day-to-day as challenges?
Everybody out there that's a mamapreneur, okay, that's somebody who is trying to build a business with a toddler at their feet, tugging on their pants, asking for another sippy cup of juice or whatever. There's a lot of mom guilt, okay, mommy guilt for saying, okay, in just a minute while you're trying to type out the rest of your whatever it is, or make that email go because you got to get it out. Or, I still have that even today. I'm like, after working a full day, I'm like, everybody fend for yourselves. Mommy's not cooking tonight. night. I'm so tired. And, my husband gets home from a very long day of work, and here I am. I have 2 jobs during the day, and I do podcasting. I'm on podcasts, and I have a podcast, so people are on mine. And I do 2 or 3 a day, so it's a full-time job just in itself, but then I have 2 other full-time jobs that I'm doing all at once. So by the end of the day, I am exhausted.
Mhm.
I feel like guilt when my husband comes in and I'm like, I don't have something ready for him to eat. I'm just like, there's plenty of food in the house. And I was thankful for Easter because I had like 3 days leftovers of food. I was like, oh, fend for yourself, lots of food. But when you're a mompreneur, there's a lot of mom guilt. My son at the time was 2.5 and 3, and he did not want to play in the playroom. We had a room designated off to the side that we built for the family daycare, because I built it in my living room. We built onto the house. I opened a preschool at a church, and then I opened up a 10,000 square foot building with a 30,000 square foot play yard and built it into $1 million business. But at the time, my son didn't want to come into the playroom. He wanted to play in his own room and by himself. He didn't want to play with anybody else. And I'm like, Parker, we're going to do arts and crafts. He's like, I don't want to. He just wanted to watch Bob the Builder and play with his little things, and he didn't care. And my son was doing odd things, like he would take Uno cards or Skippo cards, and he would put them in order according to number. He was 2. He already knew his numbers. He was putting them in order according to the number and the color. So he color coded them. So he had all the green 2s, all the purple 2, whatever it was. And it was at that time, I'm like, oh, my child is either really smart or he's got some OCD or something's going on. I knew it like around 2.5. I was like, something's not right. But there's a lot of mom guilt. I have to run a business. I have teachers that I look up to me, and I've got things that have to run according to the law. And then I have my son who was obviously having struggles, and I didn't pay attention, until he was a little bit older, or didn't know. He seemed normal. He just didn't want to play, and I didn't, sometimes I feel guilty about that. So a lot of mom guilt. That's what happens.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people can relate to this. Know that this is something that you need to do, and in some ways it gives you an outlet for doing something stimulatory. But you also, on the other hand, I mean, like you had a school, but your son chooses that he wants to do things on his own. He doesn't want to do things with a wider group, and that can be quite challenging, having to decide between those two. So well done for navigating. Was it your drive to make sure that you just kept going? Because some people could get to the stage where they then decide to back off and decide, I'm not doing this again.
Well,
What made you keep going?
happened with the whole preschool thing and why I'm not doing it to this day is because when Piper was born, the big school opened up in 2008. And for the next couple years, we were really doing well. And then we started to feel the issues with the economy. The United States was going through a really downturn in the economy, and people were losing their jobs everywhere. And so we went with 188 students to like 88 students. So I was injecting my own money. I was postpartum with my daughter. She was getting ready for surgery, and my school wasn't thriving. And I didn't know a lot about business at the time. I mean, I have a master's degree now in business. So had I known what I know now, I probably would have done something different. Probably would be running the school to this day. But when the landowner asked me to buy the business, I said yes. And we were in arbitration for a very long time because he did not pay me what he owed me. Excuse me. So it just went, at the time, I thought, I'm going to give this up for my daughter and for my family because they need me. Parker was 8. He was just diagnosed with Asperger's. He was going through behavioral therapy and lots going on. Piper needed open heart surgery, and I literally just laid on the bed with her, and she was attached to my boob the whole time. Because with tetralogy of Fallot, they don't feed well, and that's why the babies are very frail and small.
Yeah.
But Piper, she was huge. When she went in for surgery, the nurses were like, "Oh my goodness, we have to get her a new gown because usually the babies are so tiny." But here's my daughter. She was like this, 5.5-month-old, like really tall because my husband's 6'6", and so she was very long and like girthy, and they're like, wow, she looks great. You wouldn't even know that she needed it. But you could tell her face was not pink. She was pale. Just right after surgery, though, you could see her cheeks pinked up. It was like the best thing in the world. It was like we cried just to see your daughter have pink cheeks. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Anyways,
that's great. Thank you. And obviously, you've told us about some of the challenges with the business, and you're still, running your services and business, with the things you do. So, has being having children with who are neurodiverse, has it changed the way that you work with teams and set boundaries or make decisions in business?
well, not in business. Like what I do right now is I'm in broadcast media and I work for a TV station. But I also have a podcast that I am now finding more like-minded people like myself and getting on podcasts such as this one to
Mm.
talk to professionals and talk to people and give my story out there. And hopefully people will find a little bit of themselves in my words. Same thing with my book, Bucket List from a Redneck Girl.
Mm.
I'm hoping that the story of my daughter is in there. It's called Blue Baby, that chapter. And it talks about her tetralogy of Fallot and the journey that we took. And I'm hoping that there are a lot of parents that are going through that and that can, if they want to skip to that chapter, go right ahead. But I have so many different stories in that book that are just insane that people would not believe me if I told you.
I think what we can draw from talking to you is how resilient you've been through those ups and downs. And I think what again was quite inspiring is, you just picked up. We could say that you're very practical and pragmatic in the way that you approach things. Because I mean, some people would have been crushed by losing $1
Why
million.
why am I not in the corner, like, in, fetal position crying all the time? I mean, sometimes I feel that way, and I feel like I'm failing all the time as a mom, but that comes with every mother. It feels like they didn't do right by their
Mhm.
kids. You cannot undo that. Like, one of my episodes on my podcast is called Confessions from a Helicopter Parent. Because I actually had an episode with the lady and she was telling me, like, that's at a detriment, for your kids. And she was explaining it to me and I had some aha moments. And so then I made the Confessions of a Helicopter Parent. So people out there know that, like, I am not perfect. Like, I failed a lot. But one thing my kids know, and I say this to them a lot, is I love you.
Mm.
When they're walking out the door, I love you, Piper. Have a good day. Parker, I love you. Thank you so much. I love you for that. Blah, blah, blah. If you tell
Mm.
them at least once a day that you love them, they'll know that you did the very best that you could. What I feel is it's important to not just be bogged down by all the negative things in life. I could have totally, after my business fell apart, just been like, I just want to be a housewife. I don't want to do anything. No, no,
Mm.
no. I pulled up my big girl panties and I went to school and I got a degree and it took me 4 years. And then I got a good job. And then during COVID, I got my master's degree. And then after that, I had some downtime and I thought, I'm just going to write my story. I always tell people I wear my personality on my sleeves and I carry all my stories in my back pocket. My friends are always saying, your stories are crazy. I cannot believe. And they all come with laughter and humor. They're very funny. And because I'm self-deprecating, especially in the book, for sure, you can tell that I did not have good self-esteem growing up. And as I got a little bit older, I started to feel pretty, and so I started having a little bit more moxie. And then I met my husband and the whole story goes through it. But there was a lot of crazy things that happened in my life.
Mm.
High school shootings. My parents put me in a drug rehab when I didn't do drugs.
Mm.
Seriously. Car explosion, Jerry Springer wedding. I'm a stepmother, so bio mom was really crazy. And I actually went into labor while I was in court for my
Mm.
daughter. Went into labor in a town 4 hours away. There's just a lot going on in my life. It's crazy. I have a God story in there about I'm from California and I ended up lost in Idaho somehow. And then I made it home on no gasoline. I could tell you right now it was by miracle that God made sure that I was protected and looked after. And you're never going to believe the story, but I ended up, well, I can't say it because if you read the story, you're not going to be surprised.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm
Read the
sure
story.
people will.
But what I did was I created this book and I got it published by Christian Faith Publishing. And I thought, well, how am I going to get this book out there? Like nobody knows me. Like, and so I decided to do a podcast. And I thought, well, how do you do a podcast? Like, so I researched it and I Googled it and I watched YouTube videos. And here we go. Now I have a podcast. And so we do stories that are family, faith, relationship bound type stories. And now because I'm a writer and I'm actually just wrote 3 novels, which I didn't tell you before, but I have 3 novels that are in draft.
Well done.
Yeah, and so they're kind of like 49 shades of gray. I mean, like when you're reading the story, you're like looking around, making sure like who's watching me read, it's really juicy. But they're in draft. So because there are 3 that are there, it's a series, so they're all 3. They all play off each other. The story like continues through 3 books, and so I haven't decided what I'm going to do with those yet. But that's kind of they're almost done. I have 2 chapters left on my last book. But
Well done.
I have authors that come onto my podcast because I have that writer's bug, and I'm getting children's book stories or books about how to be a better parent or millennial dads. What does it mean to be a girl dad, or all the things that go along with being a parent. I try to have those things on my show. We talk about my high school shooting. I have an episode about that, and some of the other things that are in my book. I try to bring it into an episode somehow with other people out in the world that have possibly gone through the same thing. So
Fantastic. Well, you've made me really eager to read your book now. Yeah, you know.
I told secrets in the book that I didn't even tell my mother until she read the book. So it's juicy secrets. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, it's just lovely listening to your story, Jessica, because yours is a story of quite resilience in the midst of the ups and downs. It's quite inspiring listening to you because when you look at, you can have 2 people who've had the same experiences, but one person can be absorbed with the challenges that they don't even have the energy actually to get up and go. I think what's really inspiring for me listening to you, and I hope this message resonates with our audience today, is that you've been through a lot. You've been through a lot of ups and downs, but you've actually kept going. You haven't allowed it to deter you. You continued, to move forward with the things that you're doing. And I found that quite inspiring. And I think for me as a clinician, when I'm sitting in the clinic and I meet families who are just coming to see me for the first time, where they've seen concerns about differences in their child, and we're working through that whole diagnostic process. And comes to the time of feedback or just trying to outline what the concerns are, I see families who sometimes feel, oh, this is the end of their life and what all the plans and everything that they were looking at. They feel completely overwhelmed and don't feel the ability to do anything anymore. They don't feel the excitement to do anything anymore. And it can be quite challenging actually when you're trying to go through appointments, get services for your child, go from doctor to doctor, therapist to therapist. Sometimes your child will have other challenges at home. You've talked about your daughter having a fit. So you're dealing with challenges of eating, sleeping, dysregulation. It can sometimes take a lot from you as a parent to be able to think about any energy to do anything else. But I think your story is a story of hope for families out there because you have had 3 young people with different diagnostic journeys, but all having different aspects of neurodiversity. And through this, you've had a business, you've done 2 masters, you've done 2 degrees, you're working 2 jobs now, plus having a podcast, plus publishing 3 books. I mean, that is super amazing.
Aw,
And,
thank you.
and I just want to say a big well done to you because I think it's such an inspiring story. And I feel that there will be people listening out there that can draw strength from your story about, you know, fighting through even when things look very dark. And I just want to say that if you were with a parent now, is going through similar, what is the advice you will be giving to them in terms of you've met them, they're feeling completely down and out? What would you be saying to them?
Okay, so like in my instance, maybe I felt like a failure with my school, and I actually did start like a photography business. I didn't really push it too far. It went for about a year or a couple years, and I didn't do anything with that, and I kind of felt like a failure with that. No matter if you're feeling like a failure in the things that you're doing or whatever it is, just remember that you're a role model for kids and they're watching you. So remember that. If, I'm not going to let my kids just see me sitting on the couch and maybe, failing at my marriage because my husband maybe is feeling resentment that he's working and I'm not. We're a partnership. Like he works and I also have to work. I either had to work or go to school because in a partnership, you equally have to share. And if you go into a relationship being only a house mom only, that's one thing. But, in my relationship, he had anticipated, me to also be a working mom. And so I'm okay with that. But the thing is, you're a role model. You have to pull up your big girl panties and persevere. Keep going. Show your kids that, look at mommy, she went and got a degree, and look at mommy, she's writing a book. And if you want to write a book, you can do that too. You need a job. You know what? If you can handle two, you should do two jobs, because if you can handle it, more money is better for your future because you're putting money away for your 401k or your IRA or your savings for when you get older. I'm always trying to teach my kids, like, as soon as you get your first job, get an IRA, get a 401k, put some money away, because you're going to need that when you get older and retire. If you don't start now, when are you going to start? Trying to teach them about the future. But you're a role model. So don't just let everything get you down. You got to show them positive, attitude. Also, I think if kids can read that if you're down and sad and moping, then maybe they did that to you somehow because of the problems that you're going through because of them. And so you don't want to show them that they're the reason why you are upset or down or moping around. So remember, you're a role model for your kids. That's my advice.
Thank you. And just, I think the energy in what you've said is really palpable. In you want the kids to not feel that they're the reason for keeping you where they are, because sometimes, without meaning to, sometimes that can come with some emotional aspect and being upset, or sometimes some people can be angry.
Kids will forgive you for a lot of things. My parents messed up a lot when it came to me. One of the chapters in my book is called The Belt, the Hand, or the Hanger. And I was the only child out of the 4 kids that got disciplined this way. My parents did a lot of messing up when it came to me. They put me in a drug rehab when I didn't do drugs. I told you about that. But there was a lot of things. I didn't feel loved. They didn't tell me they loved me. I mean, they did a lot of messing up. And I'm telling you right now, my mom and I are totally best friends. So I forgave her. Your kids are going to forgive you. If you try and show up and you try to be the best parent you can, in the end, your kids will love you regardless. Just saying, which is the name
Thank
of my
you.
podcast.
For parents who feel too broken, too unsure, too far gone, as you've described, what do you want? What do you want to tell them that is still possible for them and for their child?
Don't put a label on yourself or feel like I did when I was a preschool teacher. I always thought like, oh, I don't want to be that kind of parent. I don't want to have to be this or that. Don't label it. Okay. You're living in the moment, and it's your journey. It's your children's journey, and it doesn't have to look like everybody else's. And you can think outside the box when it comes to trying new things. With my stepdaughter, we tried biofeedback. I mean, we tried a lot. I mean, it's kind of hokey now that I look at it, but there are other things nowadays that gives you biofeedback in a way that it did when we didn't have the video games that we have today. But think outside the box. I mean, just because somebody else deals with the disability in some way doesn't mean that your family has to do it the same way. You can look at it differently, and don't let it like be your entire identity of your family either. It's just something that you're going through. It doesn't have to be all encompassing.
Thank you. When you think about motherhood now, you're looking at your mother, yourself as a mother, your business, your work, finding yourself. How would you describe where you are now in terms of what thriving looks like for you now?
Thriving is I just don't have to do the laundry. If my kids could do that for me, I mean, because I'm a helicopter parent. I did not raise children that can do chores. Okay. I have a 25-year-old still living here. Failure to launch is a true thing. In fact, he just got his first job. Thank you, Lord. And he starts on Monday. Thank God. I'm so excited for him. I'm like going to pack his lunch and everything. See, I can't get away from being a helicopter parent. I cannot. But, I don't know. What I want is I'm getting older, okay? And I want my kids to start being self-sufficient. And I'm at that stage in my life where I want to, I don't want to have to do as much as I did. And I'm hoping that they start, because they're special. So I really want them to have like the ability to do things on their own without me. Like, Mom, is this okay? Can I do this? And all that. They still do that. And I want them to have that kind of, I want to get away from that in my life. But I did that to myself. I told you, I'm a helicopter parent. So it is what it is.
And what would you say the first step for somebody listening today? The stages to getting to, what would you say?
I'd say take a deep breath and then take another one and get online. It's okay to Google things. Go with a list of questions, okay, and concerns. And if the school has concerns, write those down and go see a professional and go with questions in hand and bring a pad of paper and a pencil and write down what he tells you, or ask him if you can record just the audio of what he's telling you so that you can go back home and re-listen. Because usually when you go to you're a ball of stress and you can't remember nothing that they told you. And you go home and your husband's like, well, what'd they say? And you're like, I don't remember, So it's a waste of an appointment. So ask if you can record it. Some doctors will not allow you to videotape them at least, but you say, I need these questions answered. If you wouldn't mind, can I record it so that I can go back and get these questions, or you may have to get those answers to the school. They might want to hear what the doctor said or whatever. But it happens to everybody. It's not just you. You leave and you only get the one thing that they said, but they told you like 10 things and you can't remember any of them. So that's my advice. Just make sure that you Google everything you need to, do some research, and make sure you go prepared when you see your professionals when you're trying to get your child diagnosed.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been an amazing session. And I just want to let you tell our audience where they want to, because I'm sure many of them have been inspired by your story, what you've talked about, and how you've overcome challenges and still been able to be very positive, very bright, and very inspiring. I think it's, as a clinician listening to you, I've drawn a lot of energy from that, which, is certainly something I can pass on, that positive message to families as well. So where can people find you, and what resources have you created, and people who are interested in learning more about your work and things that you do?
So I have a website. It's jessaying.net. That's JESSSAYING.net. And if you go there, you'll find information about all my social media, which I'm on all the things, TikTok, LinkedIn, all the things. You just click on the icons. It'll take you directly to my social media. It'll also talk about my book. And where to find it, Amazon, anywhere books sold generally. So where to find my book. My book is called Bucket List from a Redneck Girl. Redneck because I'm from a small farming town. I'm not pitchforks and tiki torches or anything. It's just totally because I'm from a small working town. And you can find out about my podcast too. It's Jess Saying with Jessica Danel. And I'm on Spotify, iHeart, YouTube, all the places. And it's relatively new podcast. I started it in July. I'm not as seasoned as you, but I've been around since July, and I'm on episode 41 right now currently.
Wow.
I'm not sure when this one's going to go to air, but I'm actually taping like my 100th episode. It's just I'm that far in advance when it comes to my taping. I've got a lot of stuff, and the first 40 are rough a little bit, but as I'm coming in, my episodes are getting better. And I do have some great guests on there. We talk about family issues and relationships and dealing with kids that are neurodiverse, but we don't stop there. We'll go on to like all the things, being a mom, all the guilt and all the things that we go through, and a lot of books, children's books and adult books and books about dads and I don't know. There's a lot of books on there. I love authors. I love their voice because they come with some background and experience, and then they write a book about it. So it's really fun to find out more about them and the book. And it's a resource for parents. It's something that tangible that they can go get and read and help them. But yeah, so that's it. My podcast, justsaying.net. Go find my website and it'll take you to all the little things, and you can come friend me because it'd be nice to build my community.
Well, thank you. Definitely. I know many of our audience will do that. And we will put that resource as well in the podcast when we release it as well. So I just want to say a big thank you to you, Jessica. It's been an amazing session. I think I've become more energized after listening to you this evening. It's been a great one.
Thank
But
you.
just thank you for the positive energy you brought in. But also, I know that our audience has picked up on a lot of that. And there will be many parents today listening to you who will want to take that first step. So a big thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I think if people go out and get my book, they'll see my story is a very simple story, but that maybe it'll inspire them to write their own story, because I think a lot of people have a lot of stories in their back pocket too.
Yeah,
So if
exactly.
you have stories in your back pocket, I say put them down on paper. Just saying.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As we always say, early intervention leads to better outcome. And early intervention can only be achieved by early diagnosis. So thank you for listening into the series today. I know some of the things we've talked about today would probably have generated some questions or need to seek clarification. So I'm happy to take questions, and I'll invite you to send your questions to eim@drtakon.com. Thank you for listening in.